Hi.
Hi. Give it a college go.
Give it a college go. Which, doesn't totally make sense.
Oh, yeah. You can hear a difference.
Yeah. Wait, because of the room?
Yeah, it's okay.
What is it like? I'm not very adept to it.
You just sound like you're in a hall.
Oh.
It's okay.
You're right.
You got some reverb. Me too.
Oh.
It's all right. I'll deal with it later. Welcome
to another episode
of
As
Woo
As
You.
You.
What?
We did that together.
Yeah.
With Celine
and Jeremiah.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, it does sound different. I don't mind it.
Yeah, it's okay for now. It's not too bad. But for our listeners out there, I just switched rooms in my apartment. I moved the studio into the living room, and I haven't had a chance to panel the walls, so that's why it's a little boomy in here.
Hallway.
Yeah, flammy.
Did you make that word up?
No, flammy.
Who made that up?
It's kind of like a shimmery high sound. It
Oh,
flams.
Flams.
Yeah.
That sounds made up, but I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flammy. So this episode's about flammy.
Flammy.
Flemmy.
I know, I'm getting over this massive cold I had.
Yeah.
It was gross.
But you seem okay.
Thank you. I took a lot of herbal medicine.
What did you take?
I took oil of oregano and then these little tinctures that had ashwagandha, peppermint oil, reishi, astragalus, just a bunch of stuff. I overdid it. I also just slept a lot. Astragalus?
Astragalus just sounds like a metal band.
Astragalus. Yeah, it does. I would listen to that band.
Yeah. Well, sleeping always helps me when I'm sick.
And also colloidal silver.
Okay.
As a nasal spray.
Oh.
Love it. Though there's a lot of stuff, if you take too much of it, you're going to turn blue. Because it's a metal.
Okay.
I'm not worried about it. Yeah, I don't know. You know.
So that's good to know.
Yeah, just some tips.
For anyone who's going through that seasonal cold situation.
Ugh, it's so gross. But today's episode.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the shadow.
The shadow.
In the shadows. Yeah, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool... Shadow work is an interesting thing to get into because it's really about your unconscious.
Okay.
Desires, things that you're kind of ashamed of or you are embarrassed about. And it's about integrating emotional alchemy of both of those sides of yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So alchemy is all about changing a substance from something that's sort of dull and, non-remarkable to something that's precious and interesting. And so emotional alchemy is doing that, but with the self.
Huh. That's a cool metaphor.
Yeah. So it's also, psychology-wise, it's a Jungian concept, Carl Jung.
Yes. That guy.
And he talks about the shadow self a lot. And so it's an interesting thing to integrate into yourself.
Yeah.
It's challenging, though, because it's just recognizing, the darker aspects of your personality.
Right.
And honoring them and being actually, you're also valid.
Right.
And important, and I see you.
Yeah.
So to go down that path, I think can be very emotionally jarring for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Totally.
What else? How else do I talk about this in a way that makes sense? So it's sort of if you have two personalities, right? You have the one that's like you're waking, the one that you and I are talking, and then you have your like silent, darker aspect, which is, you know, it can even be like, it's like kind of the like evil bad self that you are.
Yeah.
And the one that you don't want anyone to see. Or if that person comes out, you're like, oh my God, shoot. Why? I didn't want anyone to see that.
Yeah.
But so, and that division creates tension in our everyday life.
Oh, okay.
So that like inability to recognize and accept the kind of like darker part of yourself, the stuff that you don't want to talk about or the stuff that you just do in private, kind of creates a disharmony between the wills of who you are. So you have a divided will.
Wow.
And a divided will, according to like a lot of like esoteric kind of like alchemy, magic, shadow work, a divided will creates an inability for like manifestation to happen in its purest form.
Okay.
So it's a lot different than a lot of like new agey, like law of attraction stuff or, you know, manifesting what you want to happen in your life, because it acknowledges the darker aspect of your life and who you are, and that you have to accept that kind of darkness to get to kind of become a fully self-actualized version of yourself. And then you can manifest, and then you can have all these things.
And does that mean incorporating the darkness into the light such that the darkness gets absorbed into the light, or it's actually just integrating your dark and light into this kind of dualistic whole
Integrating.
being? Okay.
Because, you know, we live in a world of polarity. There's light, there's dark, there's hot, there's cold, there's positive energy, there's negative energy, and they coexist, right?
Yeah.
Everything is just a yin to a yang.
Yeah.
And as we are too, humans, right? So it's accepting that duality within the self
Okay.
and it being like empowered by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That's really cool.
Isn't that kind of cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You described that really beautifully.
Well, I've been really into it the last year.
What motivated you?
Because so this is heavy, and I'm just going to go there. But a lot of the experience of watching my mom go through cancer and then, you know, heal herself, and she did in many ways. But a lot of it is that she never was into looking at the dark part of it, like giving into sadness or like saying it's a struggle. Like she was not that way. And that was wonderful and beautiful. And it was like very powerful to see. But to me, I was like, but this is like shitty. This is bad. This is horrible.
Yeah.
And so like ever since then, I've been like, you know, like there is beauty, but then there's also like pain and suffering. And like, what is that about? Like, why is that? Why are they both holding such a hold on everything? Like, what is that root about? And then I sort of looked in like shadow work. And
Wow.
I feel like it can offer a lot of healing about stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of kind of turning a blind eye or like,
Well, what's that word? Spiritual bypassing?
yeah, spiritual bypassing.
Which
Yep,
I don't
yep.
really know that what that totally means. Do you? It's like when you avoid something.
Yeah, it's like it's like if something's challenging to you,
You just say
you just like avoid it instead of confronting it.
Right. So I think that actually is what brought, and I like want to confront stuff, you know, and so I
Yeah.
think shadow work does that
Yeah.
through like various tools.
Can you expand on some of the tools?
Well, I think it's so you have to change the way in which you feel about your darker versions of yourself, like
Okay.
internally. So
Okay.
like say there's something so I was listening to this webinar. Yeah. with Carolyn Elliott, who's like the witch from Pennsylvania.
Sex witch.
Yeah, sex magic. No, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, sex magic, but she calls it existential kink.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a big like sex, it's big into sexual energy, which
Yeah.
like I don't know. I haven't dipped my toe into that, like how that manifests totally, but so she, for example, talks about how like if something doesn't go your way, like you're giving a presentation and like the audio isn't working and then you have to cancel it. And she's like, there is a part of your being that actually finds that like struggle and that kind of like, what did she say? Oh, the scarcity of the experience as like enjoyable.
Yeah.
And so she's
So
like,
interesting.
not give in, but like honor and appreciate and like say that is valid as an experience so that you actually kind of like put a different light into that like feeling and desire of like failure.
It's
Which
interesting
is
that
like
you,
very weird.
yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just thought it was interesting that you said like put a different light
Yeah.
into it, which I just thought was a really interesting turn of phrase for that
for the
specific.
dark.
Yeah.
Well, because it's like seeing a darkness, but like in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like even
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, wow, so I've, like struggled with money, not having enough. And so like, according to this, some part of me is intrigued and like likes that kind of like lacking emotion,
Yeah. I totally get that.
which like mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that that's in my psyche too. I mean, something that I'm working through, but for me at least, it's this idea of it ties into worthiness,
Yeah.
and it's like it's easier to like not have a lot of money than it is to have money. It's almost like it's like there's all this obligation or just this sense of like it's almost a burden to have a lot of money, in a weird way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe I'm saying that from a privileged perspective, but I have been in situations where like I really didn't have a lot. And that's not fun. And I'm not saying that, it's something, it all comes back to this stuff that we were talking about with like your soul agrees to take on curriculum in this life that your conscious self is like, why the fuck?
Yeah.
But that is your prabdha karma. That is your life lesson. Those are your life lessons. And it's the difficulty and how hard it is. It's precisely the point. It's because that's literally what you're working through in this incarnation.
Yeah. And it's interesting to view. So then if you view it from this sort of like shadowy work, you're saying yes to the duality that we exist in.
Yeah.
And so then once you kind of like integrate, if you like try to integrate both sides, you kind of create a whole different experience of your life. So that like negative, bad stuff is actually like, you can kind of get into like the emotional kind of like meshing of the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I mean, I'm not an expert on this, obviously, and I don't know all the ways to practice it. I've definitely like looked into it a lot, but I just think it's really fascinating.
Well, it's kind of an exercise in transcending duality.
Yeah, or consenting to duality.
Yeah.
She uses that a lot.
Huh.
You're consenting to, the kind of like whatever is going to happen.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
That's it, because that's similar to surrender work in a certain way.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, you are surrendering to whatever it is.
Yeah.
But, it's not, how we always talk, Jeremiah and I always kind of have this like discussion of, we're almost on the same page, but we're not about like surrendering. And then I'm more like, but there has to be an intention. And he's like, no, but that is the intention. And I'm like, no, but there's more. And so I think, it is kind of that. It's like the transmutation of the intention or not.
That's a great, transmutation, such a dope word.
Isn't that so rad?
Yeah.
Transmutation. Yeah, these are my favorite words right now. Transmutation, emotional alchemy.
Yeah, emotional alchemy is
Isn't
cool.
that just like powerful?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, shadow work.
Yeah, it reminds me of like turning. People always say like it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. I mean that's a very
Yeah.
surface level way of thinking of it, but
yeah.
yeah,
And it's putting you back into your own power. Mm-hmm. And in this webinar yesterday, she read this quote from the Corpus Hermeticum, which is this very old magical text. And there's this whole kind of like section she reads about Hermes, and she's talking to humans. And she's like, the whole thing is about understanding that you are greater than you think you are. And once you understand your like power and like you can go like super high and you can go super low, then you kind of come face to face with your own divinity. And once you can do that, all bets are off.
yeah,
So actually divinity is also another one of my favorite words.
yeah. It's
Like your own godliness.
Yeah.
And you're both light and dark. Oh my God, am I becoming too much of a witch, Jeremiah?
no, that's cool. Witches are cool. Witches are cool.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah. My mom yesterday
Yes.
sent me this. It was David Brooks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. David Brooks wrote an op-ed in the Times about like the occult on the rise and
Yeah, it's so
us
funny.
millennials liking that kind of stuff. But he's a baby boomer white dude, so he's coming at it from such a like specific perspective.
Yeah.
Where he's like, well, it's a trend and it's not going to last, and this and that. Where I personally think it's tied to a much larger shift in the patriarchal world
Yeah.
to the feminine world.
Well, what's cool about all like the kind of like occult pagan stuff is that it does just give you back a position of power. Like you are you are in the driver's seat of your reality.
Yeah,
And you can surrender to that. Do you like how I said that? Surrender.
that was good.
Yeah, thanks.
That was good.
Thanks.
Well, that's like that like we were just saying earlier that Celine was talking about, like where we always kind of wrestle with this the stuff that I do with Tosha. That's like her main point is there's totally such a thing as law of attraction, but there's also your parabolic karma. And so while you are completely 100% a divine being, you have come into this world with a specific agenda. And I think what's interesting is, a lot of the woo stuff we talk about, and I think a lot of the witchy stuff, like even the crystals or feng shui or, any of these things where it's like you're almost being a conscientious hacker, for lack of a better word, of your own like spiritual journey. And I think like you're intrinsically bound to your spirit, so there's a part of you that like already knows that you're going to be taking that path.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really interesting way of approaching existence.
Yeah.
Because I think some people don't really think about this stuff, or don't. They just kind of see themselves as like a human, and that they're going to live and then they're going to die.
Yeah.
And I think like when you start to, there's actually on the Seth Speaks Instagram, there's a great repost where it was a Seth quote about basically the idea that like if a human doesn't believe in reincarnation, that you have a limited sense of existence. It's like you almost need to agree to the idea of reincarnation in order to like continue to transcend
Right.
in a spiritual way.
Right.
to understand that this is one of many incarnations.
Right. You mean that specific person is not at the place where they want to do that?
Like it's incredibly limited
Yeah.
to just think that you have one life and that's it. Like from a
Well,
traditional Western kind of
Yeah.
psychological
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I just feel like I'm at this place with all these ideas that I'm like, if you just don't want to think about it and it doesn't resonate with you, that's totally fine with me.
Yeah.
Like it's this weird thing where I don't feel like I have to explain something or show you some like math or science or show you a book if you're just not there.
Yeah.
But I think that's a new place for me. Like I don't feel,
It's nice.
yeah. For a while I feel like I felt like I had to like explain it or not talk about it because it's just kind of all these ideas, I'm like, no. Because I didn't know how to, like, it was maybe an ego thing.
Wait, you wanted to talk about it and you wanted to
No.
get other people on board, or you didn't?
I didn't. But and then I felt kind of like defensive about it, I guess, right? Like, but now I don't have that defense mechanism anymore.
So maybe that was part of your shadow self that you've
I love the shadow stuff.
you've incorporated into the light.
Maybe. I mean, also shadow stuff also talks a lot about the sexual, or maybe it's just Carolyn Elliott. I don't know if that's just her version of shadow work. I don't know if like Carl Jung talked about sexual energy.
Yeah. Honk your horn if you're horny. No, sorry. But I mean, sex is definitely, you brought it up and I actually wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's such a taboo subject, even still. Like, it's just crazy, that it's still taboo.
Is it?
I don't know. I still feel like there's a lot of kind of repression around it and like shame around it. And I mean, we are in New York, so it's different. But like, just in the mainstream media, just stupid shit. Like you still can't put tits on like Instagram or like, I think particularly in American culture, you can watch like 30,000 people get blown to bits. Like incredibly graphically, but you can't see a nipple. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are like cultural norms that we've just lived under for decades now, centuries.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when she talks about like using sexual energy to like manifest and create, it's like kink energy, like
BDSM.
Yeah, like that kind of like sexual energy where you're like, it's like shadow stuff. It's like bondage and like that kind of stuff, which like I don't have much experience with. But
as far as we know,
as far as I know,
shadow goes.
Imagine. But I think it's really interesting to talk about that because no one talks about that because it's kind of uncomfortable and like taboo.
Yeah, well, it's empowering too. I think there's something empowering. There's an irony to empowering your subness. Oh
my God, cool.
Right?
Sentence.
Like there's something empowering about being like, yeah, I want to be dominated.
Yeah.
Right? And like admitting that or vice versa. I mean, that's obviously more obvious. It's empowering saying you want to be dominant.
Right.
For some people they have a hard time saying I want to be dominant. I want to dominate.
Right.
In that kind of relationship.
Yeah. So
maybe we should see if we could get her on the show.
Oh my gosh.
That'd be cool. It'd be great to talk about.
She's gonna have a baby soon. So.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be because the way she talks about it is the way that I'm like, okay, like explore that or see what that means and use that like energy.
Yeah.
That comes from that shadow kink thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's super powerful because, relating back to our chakra episode, like the second chakra is a very powerful, fertile place of creativity. It's one of the main energy centers of creativity.
Yeah.
Clearly, I mean,
What?
where does a baby come from? It's the second chakra,
Yeah.
right? So like humans are coming from that place. That's what the womb is. So to kind of utilize that and in a way where you're harnessing the being that you are, you know,
Right.
the physicality that you are in a way that, you know, hopefully is beneficial.
Well, I also think it's like what what you were saying earlier about like living under this kind of like patriarchy of a society where like sexuality, like, women and like kind of like all of that kind of like free energy and like that power has been just like corked in a bottle for so long.
Yeah.
And I think exploring that, and I think that's coming up more, people
It's
are
coming
kind
up
of,
more for sure.
people are gonna, we're all gonna just like live in a giant commune soon.
I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, I know it's like very optimistic. It's probably definitely not happening.
Yeah. But that's like, it's funny because we were talking about Buffy earlier, but like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or another kind of precursor to the era that I think we're entering right now is the Da Vinci Code. Did you read that?
Yeah, I think I read it and I saw did they make a movie?
Yeah. Tom Hanks.
Sorry. Yeah.
But those were a couple of, I feel like, precursors. I mean, the 60s, I think, was like the obvious precursor. And David Brooks talks about that in this op-ed. He says, like, this is the age of the Aquarius again, and young people are like kind of.
Well, yeah, we
into,
all do
like,
these
free
kind of
love
like
and-
cyclical patterns
Yeah.
as a world.
Yeah, but like I said, I really do think we are. This cycle is a larger cycle.
Yeah.
That's just there's something intuitively that I just from what I've read and from what I feel, and I think most people can agree. Like there's some like serious shit going down in terms of like
it's
humanity.
just very, very polarized.
Yeah. Yeah. But I loved, I highly recommend that everyone check out, our guest a couple episodes, Kyle Freeman. Kyle had a really wonderful explanation of Feng Shui on our website, and we linked it in our episode description. Check that out, because one thing that I know after we recorded the episode, she was a little bummed that she didn't go into it further, but she wanted to talk about qi.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And how it's different than energy.
Yeah, it's different than energy. And I hope I get this right. Forgive me if I'm not, Kyle, but from what I remember from her description, qi is broken up into, there's like, I don't know the terminology that she used, but there was like kind of obvious qi, like just like the normal kind of energy qi that we always talk about. But there's also like symbolic qi, which is like the metaphorical symbolic world that we live in. And I feel like the connections that I've been making as we've been doing this podcast is there's this kind of reality that we all live in, but you can also look at it in a symbolic way. And I feel like the shadow self stuff, Feng Shui, crystals, all of these things, like sacred geometry, when you start to look at your world symbolically and less literally, you're kind of tapping into a different way of perception and existence.
Well, I think what it does is it makes it more, one, fun, and two, a game.
For you. I think it's terrifying for some people.
Well, is it though? Because if you really look at your world in a symbolic way, it takes if you're just living a version of, how do I explain this in a way that's like not scary? Like if it's just a reflection of your inner world, right? Your outer world, your circumstances, all these things, like if it's just a dream, then it's very malleable.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not scary. Like, you can have a nightmare and you can dream something and then you wake up and you're like, well, it was just a dream, whatever. If you view your world in like a less, I think you become less reactive to stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not as personal. Like you're like, I'm unhappy about this. Well, why don't I change it if it's just kind of a reflection of my inner world.
Right. Yeah.
So it's empowering, I think. It's like, cool, like this isn't what I think it is. I'm bigger than I think I am. Like, let me try some stuff out. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
What does it matter?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And I think that's when part of that is like kind of.
But it's scary. You're right.
I think it can be scary for people. I think
it should kind of be too.
Okay.
You know, like we live in a dual world. Not everything is like happy, joy, bubble time. And I feel like you're going to disagree with me on that one.
No, I agree with you.
Well, in the sense of like, I mean, I know you know what I guess I mean is like like the fear can be kind of fun.
Do you like scary movies?
Sometimes.
Wait, expand on that.
The fear can be fun.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we can use fear in a different way.
Like it'll be freeing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It can be as powerful as meditating and like love as an idea. As I don't know if this is for sure, but
wow.
like that's
something.
I think that's onto something. Like I feel like if we can like unlock that, you would kind of become really different.
Yeah. I guess I love that we're talking about, yeah, and that's like shadow stuff, right? Like embracing the fear.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I keep, we're talking about duality, we're talking about dark and light. I'll never forget this passage in an autobiography of a yogi where Yogananda talks about going into this meditation. He lived through both world wars. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine, a man of God or, a guru or whatever you want to call him, a saint, if if that floats your boat, someone who's clearly very enlightened, living in one of the most violent eras of human history, if not the most violent era of human history. And I believe it was during the Second World War when he had, or it may have been the first actually, when he had this meditation where he was asking, the divine or whatever, the universe, for clarity. Like, how could so much pain and suffering and death exist on this plane? Like, I don't understand, And it's like really intense. He basically somehow found himself in the body of a soldier mm-hmm. who gets killed. And so he experiences this man's death. And then after the death, he, I don't know, is in this other realm where like a voice kind of comes to him and talks about how the earthly plane is one of light and dark. And I'm going to murder this word, but it's the painting term for light and dark, chiaroscuro. It's an Italian word.
Chiaroscuro?
Yeah, hold on, I'm going to look it up.
There's another term like that called modulation, where all colors start and begin and then end as one. I wonder if it's the same thing.
Oh, that's it. It's chiaroscuro. So chiaroscuro. And according to Wikipedia, chiaroscuro in art is the use of strong contrast between light and dark, usually bold contrast affecting a whole composition. So the whole idea was like,
what I was saying.
Yeah, the world we live in, what gives it form, what gives it form is light and dark.
I mean, that's also going back to Seth. That's like a framework.
Right.
Like we're in that framework. This is our design here.
I just got hit with something.
Really?
That was weird. Yeah. I just felt very clear in a weird way.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. We live in a world of light and dark and, mm-hmm. My dad will be happy I'm bringing this in, but like the Old Testament, right? And then there was light.
Yeah.
You know,
this
like
isn't like a
this isn't a new thing
concept
at all.
At all.
But so the thing that I've been struggling with is, with a lot, like even with the Yogananda stuff, with a lot of yoga philosophy or Buddhism or any of these things where like you're starting to transcend the dualistic framework. Go.
Well, so I think this is where the shadow comes in. And because I think like transcending the duality when we're only focused on one part of it isn't going to work. And so I think that's why like we struggle with all these things. It's like we don't, and also everyone kind of like poo-poos the spiritual movement because it is so much about focusing on like the positives and the gratitude and all that kind of stuff. But your gratitude is for the things that are great, right? And not for your experiences that have like damaged you and like hurt you. And, so transcending something when it's like the Carl Jung thing when he talks about the divided wills. A divided will can't move forward. So these transcending things, I agree. It's a struggle. Because I don't know, I don't know.
Yeah,
I kind of lost what I was thinking.
No, that's okay. That's been my struggle is like understanding that we live in this world of light and dark and working on myself and trying to reach that bliss that is beyond light and dark.
Yeah.
Because I do think there is something there that goes beyond it.
For sure.
And I don't know what that is. And it's kind of, again, related to like, I think, we were just talking about it earlier, and I think it's going to keep coming up in our podcast because in order for you to really start to live some of these things and incorporate some of these things, you have to transcend this concept that you're just human. You really have to understand that you're a soul. And that means accepting darkness. And again, your path is going to have dark periods because that's how you learn,
Well, and that's also just the construct of the nature of the reality in which we live in.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other constructs that are like, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, different stuff where they don't have this like polarization so much.
So it's cool that you said that because I think one way of transcending the light and the dark is dealing with the fourth dimension, which is time.
Right. Which is nuts.
Yeah. So I feel like...
Elaborate what you mean on that.
Well, I haven't finished The Power of Now.
Okay.
But I'm about halfway through it.
You get the gist.
And I got the gist of it.
Yeah.
And, his argument, which I agree, Eckhart Tolle, is this idea that, essentially all of our problems stem from our past or our future selves because we're not living in the present. And that if you're actually fully in the present, there's no problem.
Right. It's void.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
And that's when you actually can start to transcend.
Right. It's like you're not defined by who you are or who you're going to be. You just are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that's so hard to do. But I feel like, I used that a lot when I used to have more anxiety, and the Power of Now really helped me with that. Mm-hmm. Because anxiety is, you're worried. It's a fear thing. You're worried about something that's going to happen that happened.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so if you're just like, hold on, right now, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah. That's I used that a lot when things were really tough money-wise.
Yeah.
The anxiety was overpowering and I lived in terror. And one way I was able to one thing that it did was it threw me into the present, because it was
Right.
like the sheer fear, allowing my brain to go into the future, into like worry future, was just like not, it wasn't a, I'm trying to think of the word. It wasn't a feasible thing. Like for my psyche, it like wasn't feasible to go that like to
Well,
go
I
there.
feel like it's also, there's some survival thing going on, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I'll say is I'll do a little preview. Next week we do have a guest, and should I say her name?
I think so.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Leslie Galbraith,
Oh my God.
an astrology reader here in Brooklyn, New York, will be coming to join us on the cast. We're
So
super
psyched.
looking forward to it.
So psyched.
And I had a reading with her for my birthday last week, courtesy of Melissa. Thank you, Bae. And one thing that she said was like, I had all this stuff happening in my second house.
Right.
And my second house is the house of like money, worth, value, all of these things. So like I know that that's part of my shadow self, and that is something that I'm, have been working on. And I think you don't need to have an astrology reading to know like where you need to do your work, but it can definitely help.
Well, depending on how like self-aware you are.
Yeah.
I think like you and I may be like very introspective, but like, maybe someone else is like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why are all these things happening?
Right.
Why is
And
everyone being mean to me?
Yeah.
And you're like,
You love doing.
what?
Well, what are you bringing to the table?
What do you mean?
As in, like, why is everyone being mean to me?
Oh, yeah. No, I know. That's like my favorite thing. Well, like, what are you attracting?
Yeah.
What are you putting out there?
Right.
Because it's so powerful, like.
It is powerful.
And it's so hard to hear. It's so hard to hear when you're
Yeah.
like, well, I'm just sad. I can't find the right like fit, or I'm broke all the time and I can't find a partner. And to be like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah.
But, I feel like that's kind of, if you, it's hard, but then you can kind of like move forward and through the emotion, and it becomes like powerful and empowering. Like you're not a victim of your life. Mm-hmm. You can like do some cool stuff. Mm-hmm. Because why not? What is there to lose? The world is so garbagey and like scary. So like, why not make it kind of fun?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And the world isn't all garbagey.
Yes.
It's half garbagey.
It's half garbage, half delight.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's super empowering. What were you saying? I think a big part of that too is, and I'll keep saying it again and again, because I think I've known that for various things in my life where it's like, what am I doing that's making this? Why am, and I really think, and I don't know if this plays into shadow work, but I do think you have to send love to yourself. So for me...
Well, yeah, it's all, the shadow is all about sending love and like acknowledging you love the part of you that's embarrassed or ashamed.
Right. And so that's the thing where like...
So it's the same thing.
Yeah. And that's why I think love is actually the transcendent force.
Well, for sure, because
Yeah.
what you're doing is you're acknowledging and you're giving that part of yourself space, and you're saying, no, it's okay, come. And I'm going to like love you and honor you. So you're, like I said, you're putting light into a dark. Mm-hmm. And it still can be there, and it's still valid. It's not going anywhere. You're just like, I own you, and it's cool. I just think that's so rad.
That's super rad.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shadow self.
Shadow self. And then what's that movie called? In the Shadows? The vampire movie?
Oh,
It's so weird and
What We
fun.
Do-
What We Do in the Shadows.
What We Do in the Shadows. Yeah.
Yeah. I recommend everyone watching that movie.
Yeah. It's a TV show now too.
Is it?
There's an FX TV show. Yeah.
I bet it's not as good.
I heard it's okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Again.
Yeah.
Crushed it.
That was really good.
I think that was a very interesting episode.
Yeah.
I hope everybody else thinks so.
I hope everyone else. Shadow work is tough, but It is the hardest thing. And I know that there are a lot of different ways of doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and I do think that if you're interested in like learning more about it and open to it, really going to Carolyn Elliott's website, and she just has a bunch of information. You can just like dip your toe, tap into that, and then look at Carl Jung. He talks about the shadow. There's a lot of stuff about it. I feel like that's my new thing lately. And, you know, next time I'm going to be a god. No, I'm just kidding.
You already are a god,
I
Celine.
know.
We all
Oh,
are.
boy. What else? Do you want... Should we do something? No. Yes.
Well, I had a couple of ideas, but
Go for it.
maybe one that is really practical is, you know, Shaman Durek talks about shadow work a lot. And one thing that he says, which I think is kind of fun, is like if it's like a sunny day out, he'll like, you know, be standing and he'll turn to his shadow and like talk to his shadow.
Oh, fun. See, that's a fun way to tackle it.
Yeah. So you're like, hey, shadow, like, I love you, shadow, you know, and then like kind of talk and
Yeah.
just kind of approach the shadow and
just
send it love and bring it to the light, you know?
Yeah, and I'll add that like another way you can do it is if you have a moment in your day and you're like maybe you like lose your temper at somebody or you become like really frustrated at something. Like try to just take a moment and be like, you know what? It's okay. Like I love that part of myself. I'm not embarrassed that I got like upset. Like, you know, like and just honoring that a little bit.
Yeah, we're all human.
Yeah, it's kind of just like be easier on yourself. I think it's like a softness that you develop with yourself.
See, it's so interesting because I think shadow work, you know, you'd bring it up a lot and it would freak me out a little bit. It's scary.
No, I know it's scary. I know.
But you know, turning it that way where it really is like it's about being kind to yourself and like loving to yourself, and that's actually how you work with the shadow. I don't know. It's so much easier for me to.
Yeah, it's like dealing with your unconscious, the things that, you know, take the shame away from it or take like the harsh judgment of like things you want or desire that you're like, I shouldn't really do that.
Right.
And like just being like, it's cool. I got you. So.
Well, on that note,
Okay.
we love you.
We love you.
And we love your shadow
Oh
selves.
my God, so much.
And we'll speak to you on the next cast.
Bye.
Bye.